Good evening, ladies. Thank you for joining me this evening, and I thank you for offering up your time and your thoughts on such a controversial topic. This season feels like there's an attack on women of all ages, from what we do with our bodies to how we support and raise our children. And our voices are being ripped away from us at the seams, and our autonomy is being removed. We're being dehumanized. We're being objectified. We're being minimized to this role of incubator in today's society. And the most disheartening thing is it feels like we're all being held responsible for society devaluing our presence. So it's like we don't have a say-so in anything that happens, but we're responsible for the outcome. So we all know that as women, we have some type of superpower. Only we can actually give birth to anything, no matter where you are on the spectrum. That's what we do. We create things, we breathe life into things. And it feels like society is just trying to take that away from us. So I really do thank you for joining me to discuss this topic. I want to lay the ground rules for our discussion this evening. We want to respect ourselves and each other. So we want to try not to cut one another off or devalue one another's experience, even if it seems a little off the kilter. Not saying that it will be. This conversation is not for the faint of heart. We might get a little tense. We're going to try not to curse. We may, it might slip, and that's fine. But we're going to try not to curse as much. And be as open and as honest and as vulnerable as you desire. If you get mad, be mad. This is a safe space. And that's what OutSpoken is all about, making sure that everyone can have their voices heard. So with that being said, I want to start us off in prayer. So if you could please bow your head. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for each soul on this line. We thank you for them graciously giving their time that we may learn from their experience, that we may hear their voices with an open mind, open heart, and open ears. We ask that this conversation be fruitful in nature, oh God, and that we not be the only ones who benefit for the words spoken on this evening. We ask that you lift us up, that you would open our eyes so we see as you do, open our ears that we hear as you do, and open our hearts that we receive and love one another, just as Christ loved us. We ask these things in Jesus' name, the name exalted above all the others. Amen, amen, and amen.
Amen.
All right, now that we got the serious stuff out of the way, I would like for us to just kind of introduce ourselves. You can introduce yourself by the nickname you want to be known as, or your official government name, however you want to be addressed throughout this conversation, and tell the world something interesting about you. I'll start. Unless you want to start, Titi.
You go ahead.
Okay. My name is Sean Terry, and my name has been mispronounced my entire life since kindergarten. Period. Doesn't matter how many times I corrected the teacher, it was mispronounced. So I started going by Nicole until I did an inner child meditation. And at the end, you're supposed to let your inner child approach you. And my inner child just like slid in there, was like, by the way, my name is Sean Terry. So I dropped the Nicole and went back to Sean Terry.
My name is Cecilia. I do go by Cece. I just like my nickname. My name was also mispronounced because I'm missing an I. So I remember meeting you, and also I remember calling you Nicole and different other things. But just because we were in the military. But I have 3 kids, one son and 2 girls, and I feel like I'm busy all the time. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's that.
Oh, yeah. I feel you.
Hello, my name is Rachel. Something interesting about myself. I've been living the life of a woman, I believe, 37 years now. And I have 2 children. One that I birthed just because of the relation of the topic. And I'm also busy a lot and work a lot and try to keep up with what's going on. So this should be a very interesting discussion for me this evening.
I think it's going to be awesome. So we're going to roll right into it. I'm going to ask this first question because I think it's very important. It's about, generational truths. And I want to know how you think Roe V Wade will influence the legacy that you leave behind for your children? How do you think it's going to impact their lives and what you're trying to cultivate in them?
I think it's very imperative, or the way that I, raise my children is to always stand up for yourself, always stand up for what you believe in, always stand up for what, you feel is right, and always follow your gut, with your decisions. So, um, it's crazy that we're having this conversation because when this happened, I have a 18-year-old daughter who just started her college this last week, and I had to really sit down with her and explain, Roe versus Wade and the impact that it would have on her future now and later, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I had to explain, like, this is what it means and this is where it could possibly lead you. So we had to look at alternative measures, as in the what if this happens, what if this, doesn't happen. But as far as, I also have a son that's 21, and I had to sit down and explain things to him as well because, men, have sex and things happen. And it's like, hey, son, if you get a girl pregnant, you know, be prepared to, basically sex is more, how do I explain, more than just, intimacy, because now there's adult things that could possibly happen. And with this, you may get something that you're not prepared for. So just make
Mm.
sure you're making the correct decisions, because the rights of are kind of being taken away from us, um, as far as our bodies. And honestly, if you do the research, it affects Black women more than any other, um, area. So it's just crazy. But as far as the legacy part, I just stated that, I teach my kids to stand up for what they believe in. So, my daughter was really upset about it. And I'm just like, hey, she's like, I feel like, society is trying to limit our rights to make choices, which I
Mhm.
also feel in that way. And, men are going back to the days of, telling women what to do. So, we had that conversation. Um, but, the thing about everything is in today's society is there's always other choices, and we
Mhm.
just have to choose carefully. And there's also the ability to fight, because
Yeah.
back in the day we didn't have the ability to fight for ourselves.
Yes.
So that's the legacy that I want to leave, and still, thrive in my kids is you always have the right to fight for what you believe in, but you also have the decision to make better choices based off of what you're limited to, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Rachel?
With my children not yet being of age to where we're at the stage where we're just learning that you can have a child. So we haven't even got to the step as far as, the limitations with that.
Yeah.
So the legacy is always to build them up so that they can be an impact to the community.
Mhm.
So definitely, making sure that they are educated, the importance of voting at the lowest level, because that's where most of the impact is. They think
Oh,
it's at
yeah.
the presidential level, but it's not there.
Mhm.
But making sure they're voting at the lowest level, that way they can have a say in decisions that are being made. The legacy that it will leave at this time, I mean, I'm going to keep them educated, but if with those criteria, I will hope that in general guidance that, kids do what they want to do when they grow up. But
Yeah.
I will hope that the path would be to try to make those right decisions anyway, um, to try to avoid those possible situations where, you may or may not have to have a child because you want to or you don't want to. So, definitely trying to incorporate the understanding of having a plan, and then sometimes the plan don't work. So at that point, educating them on, okay, this is the possible results. But even before that, having the ability to be in the community, to have a seat at the table when
Mhm.
those decisions are being made. And I guess going back to what Cece said, of having a voice about
Yeah.
that. As far as my son goes, he's older. He just went, got into the ninth grade. So they're going to begin. I'm wondering if the education system is going to incorporate those things now. that they're making these policies, I still have hope and belief that it's possible to turn it around.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Me too.
I'm not totally sold on this is what's going to be the final, because I believe, just like we are all busy, there's some women that pretty much get involved. They just got caught up in other things and are hoping that we can stand together and come back and get this right back to us where the decision is ours.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Those are both great answers. Like, I really have not really much to add. You both kind of covered what I would actually say about my boys. I want them to, but the biggest thing for them is to respect the no. Like,
Mhm.
don't go in feeling that you're entitled to a woman like the rest of the world is. Respect the
Right.
no. Teaching Dylan that at a young age and trying to instill those biblical principles so that he has a solid foundation from where he can actually continue to grow from once he's no longer my child, but still my son.
Right.
And, voting at the lowest level, they undersold that so much. In school, they never taught us that. Rachel said it, she's absolutely right. They taught us that it was at the presidential level, and you realize the president actually has no power, and that true policy change actually happens. It starts sometimes at the social welfare office with the social workers, the licensed clinical social workers, with the policy advocates. Hopefully, we can get this fight back where it belongs at the lowest level and enact something on state level and then take it to the federal government. And it may be quite some time before that happens, but please believe I'm gonna be in the fight too, because this ain't even it. I've always believed
Right.
in, that having that choice, having autonomy. So having that taken away doesn't feel great at all, though it is clearly not an option for me to conceive a child. Just to be able to not have that choice, that's earth shattering. So I don't want to get on a soapbox, so we're gonna move on to the next question. As mothers of boys, and you kind of hit on this a little bit in the last question, but I want to touch on it a little bit more. How do you think this decision affects your sons? We talked about the possibility of getting someone pregnant, the intimacy involved in it, the possibility that there are no other options until this child might come into this world, and you have to be prepared for that. And will this change how you parent your daughters versus how you parent your son?
Yes. Yes.
Speak to it.
So again, I have a 21-year-old son.
Mhm.
I have an 18-year-old daughter, and the conversations about this were totally different.
Mhm.
I couldn't even have them at the same time, simply because I have an African American son who already every day he wakes up in today's society, has so many challenges that he has to face just because he's an African American boy,
Yeah.
sadly to say, or young man, sadly to say. So the conversation that I had with him is, you know, intimacy is involved. We're all adults. You're technically an adult now, even though he will always be my child. He is an adult. The conversation is different. The conversation stems to make smart decisions. Don't think with, as my dad would say, the wrong head. You have to
Mhm.
think with, your brain, and understand that now, back in the day, you could just give a girl like a couple of $100 and if she chooses to make that decision, she could, but now we may not actually have that, right? So,
Mhm.
son, you need to make sure that you as the man do the, correct things and take the correct measures to prevent an unwanted or unplanned pregnancy, because an unwanted and unplanned pregnancy could result to so many things, to include a change in your lifestyle.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's just true. You don't know if that child is going to come here with medical or birth defects. You don't know the financial cost in today's society to raise a child has tripled. So
Yeah.
I'm just like, prevent yourself from even being placed in that situation for let's just say a one night happy moment. I mean,
Mhm.
let's just be honest. And so my thing is, about last year, my son came home from college, and I was doing the typical mom thing. I guess I was invading his privacy, but I was trying to be nice and do laundry. And
Mhm.
I opened his duffel bag, and he had a ton of condoms. At first, I was really upset, but then I kind of got proud because at first I'm like, oh, my son's out here having sex and he's not focused in school. But then I had to turn it around and think differently and say, okay, well, I'm proud because he's doing what I taught him to do, which is
Absolutely.
be responsible for
Yeah.
his, decisions. So the conversation with my son is, so I can't stop you from having sex. One, I teach him to always value women and treat women correctly because of the way I was raised and also what I've been through. But two, just make smart decisions and
Yeah.
remember that this could possibly lead to something else. And if it does, you have to be man enough or ready to take on that male role and
Yeah.
be the father that you're supposed to be, because again, she may not be able to have the right to say, I don't want this child anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So he's 21. So then we switch over to my daughter who's 18. Now, my daughter this year, she, as a mom, you never want to think about your kids for me, I never wanted to think about my kids having sex. But my daughter, the love that I have for my oldest daughter, because I have an 8-year-old as well, but the love that I have for my oldest daughter is we have an open door policy. I have an open door policy with all of my kids. So she's very honest. And so she came to me years ago and said, hey, I want to be on birth control. And she wasn't having sex, but at least she was responsible enough to tell me that she wants birth control because, again, I've instilled in her the right to make choices. I never forced my kids to get on birth control. I never
Mhm.
forced my kids to, do it, but I talk to them and I discuss everything so that they can learn at an early age the importance of thinking things through and making the correct decisions in choices that they make, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it does.
So
It does.
she came to me and said, "Hey, mom, I think it was junior year. She's like, I want to get on birth control." But her reason at the time was because her cycles were like irregular and heavy, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, but also, mom, I'm not gonna lie. There's some times where I think I may want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it and everything. And she got off birth control because she was not sexually active. But when the Roe versus Wade, we sat down and talked. And the first thing she said is, "Mom, put me back on birth control." And I said, okay. And again, she says that she's had sex before, but she says she's not really, sexually active. But she was like, Mom, at least I can be responsible enough to say, hey, I'm, preventing the possibility of making a mistake.
Yeah.
So at least I could say I took this amount of percentage to prevent me from, being making a mistake that I can't overturn or I can't fix because we
Mm-hmm.
don't know, what's gonna happen. And so we talked about it. So, she got back on birth control. And then we talked about the other forms. Like my daughter's like, Mom, plan B. Like, do I just keep a plan B on standby? And I'm like, let's just slow things down and just, don't get so nervous about it. But at the same time, we talk about everything, so it's like she understands how plan Bs work. She understands how female condoms work. She understands, it's okay to carry male condoms, you
Yeah.
know, and she takes all those measures in case she does have sex because she just really doesn't. Her goal is to go to medical school, so she really doesn't want to be one of those statistics like me, who had a kid at 17.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, Mom, I'm not knocking you, but I want to live out my dreams. And
Yeah.
so I commend her for that. So the conversations that I had with both my male and my son and my daughter was totally different because my son, you have to take on a different role. But as my daughter, I would never want her to be a single mom struggling or, because just because you have sex with a guy and let's just say you get pregnant, statistically in African Americans, you know, we have a high rate of single
Yeah.
mom homes. So
Yeah.
I don't want her to be there. So, just probably over talking, but the
No,
conversations
no.
were
Yeah.
totally different, totally different. I've always tried to raise my sons um, to always be accountable for their actions and to always be a successful young Black man. It's okay to make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
but always own them and always learn from them and always grow from them. And I also teach my daughters to always be independent and, to be educated and always educate yourself so that you can always know, things and never like be dependent. Of course, the man is supposed to protect and provide, but at the same time, you also are, smart enough to educate yourself so that you can be in a partnership with whomever you're with. And, so I just teach them differently. And so
Yeah.
I cannot have the same conversation with them when I talk about certain topics. And honestly, this was one of the ones where I had to have two separate conversations. And so far, knocking on wood, but my son's 21, my daughter's 18, and I'm not a grandmother. So I'm grateful,
Ooh.
because I grew up in Georgia, and it's funny because we just had this conversation this weekend. I was the first cousin out of my grandmother's children not to have a child before the age of 16.
Mm-hmm.
I went in the Marine Corps at 17 and I had my son at 18,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so, but statistically, I went to high school where there was daycare in the classrooms because
Wow.
there were so many kids, so many girls having babies that you could bring your baby to school, you know. So,
Wow.
yeah, and I'm from Atlanta, so,
Yeah.
it was pretty intense. And so the first child that I ever held was my own child. I would
Mm-hmm.
never hold anybody else's in high school because I just was so afraid that I would be a statistic of my environment. But
Mm-hmm.
thankful for me, I wasn't. But we talked about that. And so my daughter jokes all the time. It's like, well, mom, Damon didn't have a kid, and so now I'm going to prove you wrong. We're all going to wait until we're married. Is do I want that? Yes, I would hope so. But if it doesn't happen, I'm just proud that they beat the stereotypes for our background.
Yeah.
So I always think that some conversations, such as this one, you do have to have two totally different conversations. I just do.
Absolutely. No, I'm right there with you. And you know what? All of this serious talk is making me hungry, so I'm going to take it to a commercial break and tell you about a friend of mine who actually loves to bake. We'll be
Okay.
right back after this.
I'm LaQuille, proud owner of L&C's Cookie Shop. I decided to turn my hobby into a business. I started baking as a stress reliever, and well, here we are today. The flavors are really endless here at L&C's Cookie Shop. If you can imagine it, we can make it happen. Not only do I offer cookies, I also offer a variety of brownies as well as cinnamon rolls.
Welcome back. I'm still hungry, but it's for more conversation. Before the break, we were talking about how, we are all mothers of sons, and we were just kind of discussing how it impacts our sons, and if it's going to change how we parent our sons versus how we parent our daughters. So, Rachel, do you have anything to add to that conversation?
I don't have a lot, but I will say I don't believe it is going to impact how I parent my son, because my ultimate goal with parenting my son is in relation to women, is to honor them and to respect them. And that starts with, my husband intentionally, showing respect towards me, and times where he's allowing them to see, this is how I'm treating your mother. This is how I'm treating your sister. Even my sister gets the same treatment as I do as far as respect goes. So ultimately, I will hope that, he has a respect and honor for women, and decisions that they have to make, or will make with their body. So of course, this will be a part of the conversation when talking to him about, responsible things that he have to do in the future, when any situation arises. But I hope it resides with just, the honor for a woman and respecting them. And then as far as, how it would change how I parent my daughter, eventually I'm going to have a conversation, and it's kind of different from what CC said just a little bit, because when I have conversations with them,
Mm-hmm.
my initial conversation, because they're close, my daughter is 10
Mm-hmm.
and my son is 14. While that appears to be a major gap, my daughter's maturity level meets my 14-year-old's maturity level.
Mm-hmm.
It may sound a little strange,
No.
but
Mm-mm.
I want to have my initial conversations of my serious subjects with them both, because as a woman, I want her to observe how men may think. Now, my son will ultimately be a man, and men think differently than women. And sometimes, they're groomed and become better, but that's a learned behavior, I believe. Sometimes, originally they got that immediate immature thought and not taking things into account. I actually want my daughter to see that. Not in a sense of where she'll disrespect her brother, but I want her to observe that sometimes you might think the other person, if you choose to get involved with, are thinking like you and they're not thinking like you. So those initial conversations I want to have with them both, because I want a realness there. I want to keep it real with them, because what I don't show them, they're going to learn at the schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, we'll come back and we'll break it down and get a little bit more intimate with those subjects. But I want them both to know that it's coming, because if I'm not here, my daughter and my son are not always going to want to talk to me, but I honestly believe they're going to talk to each other. So if I allow these conversations to be something that's common, I feel that if they can't come to me or my husband, that at some point they might mention things to each other and they can guide each other along the way.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Oh, giving me all the feels. Just such great conversations, such like a wealth of experience and knowledge and wisdom we have with us this evening. And I am so grateful to know you both. And believe it or not, you both have actually taught me a thing or two about being a parent and about being a woman. So I do thank you. And I've used a lot of what I've been taught to kind of like grow Mel and Dylan up to be the best they can be. Mel, he's 12. He's about to be 13. And when Roe V Wade was overturned, he was like, "What's that?" And so I had to sit him down and explain to him that, I no longer have control over my uterus. And that's exactly what I said to him. And he was just like, "Wait, you mean the part of your body that the baby's in? How do you not have control over it?" And I explained it to him. I broke it down. And he was just like, okay. So I'm like, you need to hear me. You need to hear me. Right. Because if you end up, growing up and getting a little bit older, and you say right now, this is his words exactly, "I'm okay being a single Pringle." You grow up and you decide you don't want to be a single Pringle anymore. You want a girlfriend, and you and your girlfriend decide to have a little one-on-one time with each other. And out of that 1+1, something else happens. And now you're sitting up and you're coming to me, or you're coming to your dad, and you're scrambling because there's a baby that could potentially be in this world. And you have no other choice but to let that happen, even if she doesn't want it to happen, just as you guys said earlier. And he kind of understood the severity of it. And I know that it's going to have to be a conversation that I have with him often. And, Dylan, he's just kind of sitting there just soaking it all up. 7 years old, but kind of doesn't like the idea of me not being able to say what goes on with me. And I'm always trying to teach them about boundaries, about respecting people's boundaries and having their boundaries respected. What can I tell them when the government's like, "You don't have any boundaries. We have boundaries." I mean, even in Georgia, they spend more money on abstinence programs than they do for temporary assistance for needy families. So their logic is, with their 6-week fetal heartbeat ban, you're either going to stop having sex or you're going to have this baby. I don't know who they thought was going to adhere to that, but even if I do find myself back in the beautiful state of Georgia, no. Not even a little bit. If science changes and somehow two women can get together and make a baby, I'm not going to be out here in these streets doing that. And I'm not going to have a child that I do not want to have, that I may not be able to take care of because I'm on welfare, food stamps, and anything else. But that's the place that they're putting people in. And, I'm sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent that has nothing to do with how I raise my sons. But I do want them to understand what could potentially happen one day. If they end up, on this side of the field, and they have a child coming into this world that neither them nor their mate or their spouse wants to have.